My sister hid drugs in my room and had me arrested. My parents backed her up. But then my lawyer showed them this. My sister planted drugs in my room and called the police on me. My parents backed her up as witnesses, knowing I was innocent. Just take the blame, they told me. But then my lawyer showed them this. My mom went completely pale. My dad couldn't speak. It didn't feel like the day my life fell apart. There was no dramatic music, no pit in my stomach, no sudden chill down my spine like people always describe when something awful is about to happen. It was just a regular Thursday morning in suburban Denver. The kind that starts out boring and stays boring until all of a sudden it doesn't. If I'd known what was coming, that by lunchtime I'd be in handcuffs with my parents politely nodding while I got arrested in my own living room, I probably wouldn't have worn my old Broncos sweatshirt with a coffee stain. But I didn't know, not until the knock. There were two of them. One tall and lanky, the other built like a college linebacker who'd forgotten how to smile. Both in uniform, calm, practiced, like they'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Vanessa Martinez. My mouth went dry. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because no one expects cops to show up on your doorstep like you ordered them off DoorDash. Yeah, I said, half answering, half asking. We received a tip about illegal substances at this address, the tall one said like he was reading from a script. We'd like to come in and take a look. Behind them, Maple Street looked exactly the same. Same red mailbox with the faded American flag sticker, same old oak tree, same neighbor's golden retriever peeking through the white picket fence. But everything felt tilted, like someone had shifted the world just slightly off its axis. Okay, I said, stepping back. I didn't even think to say no because I wasn't guilty. Because at that moment, I thought this was about my sister Cassie. I thought they'd finally caught up with her late-night visitors and the sweet smoke that drifted under her bedroom door. I followed them down the hallway, still confused, still trying to make sense of what they'd said. Illegal substances. Had Cassie finally pushed things too far with whatever she'd been doing since dropping out of Colorado State? Then I saw my mom. She was in the kitchen, calm, composed, coffee mug in hand like she was expecting company, not cops. Oh, officers, she said, setting the cup down with a soft clink on our granite countertop. Vanessa's room is upstairs, second door on the right. I blinked. What? Why my room? No one answered. My dad was standing by the breakfast bar, and he didn't look surprised. He didn't look at me at all. The officers didn't wander or search. They went straight upstairs like they already had GPS coordinates to my bedroom. Cassie stood at the top of the stairs, leaning against the banister in that casual way she'd perfected since high school. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, wearing her favorite Northwestern University hoodie and yoga pants, iPhone in hand. She didn't say a word, didn't even blink when the officers walked past her. She just watched with those pale blue eyes that had always gotten her out of trouble. Our old beagle, Murphy, lifted his head when they entered my room. He didn't bark, just wagged his tail once, slow and uncertain, like he wasn't sure what kind of moment this was supposed to be. The taller officer scanned my room, the purple walls I'd painted myself, the bookshelf crammed with mystery novels, my desk still scattered with community college textbooks. The other went straight to my dresser, and then, without so much as a pause, he pulled open the bottom drawer. There it was. A sealed plastic baggie full of white pills, sitting right on top of my neatly folded sweaters. I laughed. Like an actual, short, stunned laugh. Because what else do you do when reality takes a hard left turn into crazy town? Okay, that's not mine, I said, my voice coming out higher than normal. Neither officer reacted. They'd heard it before, probably every day. I turned around fast, looking for backup, for sanity, for someone to tell them this was all some horrible mistake. My parents were standing in my doorway now. Mom's hands were clasped in front of her like she was at church. Dad still hadn't looked me in the eye, just stared at a spot somewhere over my left shoulder. Tell them, I said, louder this time. You know that's not mine. One of the officers turned to them, pen poised over his notepad. You mentioned earlier you've seen her with this bag. My mom nodded. So soft it was barely a movement. Yes. We didn't know what it was at first, but she's been distant lately. Secretive. Distant. Like that was somehow criminal evidence. We thought it was just stress, my dad added, finally speaking up. College applications, you know. But she's been spending a lot of time alone, acting different. It was like watching someone else's life fall apart, except it was mine. My room, my dresser, my name on the police report that was probably already being typed up somewhere. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice cracking. "Cassie, tell them." "Vanessa." My mom's voice cut through mine like scissors through silk. "Don't make this worse than it already is." That's when they put the handcuffs on me, right there in my childhood bedroom, while Murphy whined softly from his spot on my reading chair and Cassie watched from the hallway like she was streaming a show on Netflix. There was always a golden child in our house, and it sure as hell wasn't me. Cassie was born 3 years before me, and somehow, magically, maybe genetically, she was everything my parents had ordered from the universe. Smart, confident, photogenic. One of those kids who never had a messy room or took a bad picture. When she cried in public, strangers offered her tissues and candy. When I cried, I got told to stop making a scene. I don't think my parents ever meant to make me feel invisible, but they did. Repeatedly, consistently, in ways so subtle it took me years to realize I wasn't imagining it. When Cassie brought home a lopsided ceramic bowl from her high school pottery class, they cleared a spot on the mantel to display it like it belonged in the Smithsonian. When I spent 2 weeks working on a short story that won second place in our county's writing contest, it ended up in a drawer next to expired Bed Bath & Beyond coupons. When Cassie had her senior piano recital, they rented folding chairs and made sweet tea for half the neighborhood. When I was cast as Emily in our community theater's production of Our Town, they forgot to come. Said they thought it was just a dress rehearsal. They weren't cruel, just selective with their attention. Like I only existed in the quiet moments between their pride in her achievements and her next performance. A background character with decent timing and sensible shoes. I used to think if I behaved perfectly, got good grades, kept my room clean, stayed out of trouble, they'd finally see me. But all it really did was make me easier to ignore. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, but the quiet wheel gets forgotten in the garage. When Cassie turned 16, she begged for a dog. She made PowerPoint presentations, wrote contracts in glittery gel pen, used phrases like emotional support animal and teaching responsibility. My parents, predictably, caved. Enter Murphy, a scrappy beagle mix who looked like someone had tried to build a hunting dog from memory and gotten most of the details wrong. Cassie loved him for exactly 3 weeks. Then she decided he was too energetic, too loud, too much work. My parents started calling animal shelters. I was 13. I said I'd feed him, walk him, train him. They didn't believe I'd follow through, but they didn't want to deal with him either. So they said fine, but he was my responsibility now. Murphy wasn't a responsibility, though. He was the first thing in that house that ever chose me over Cassie. He slept curled against my legs every night. He'd follow me from room to room, tail wagging like I was his whole world. And yeah, maybe I became a little too attached. Maybe I talked to him more than I talked to people. But Murphy listened, and sometimes that was enough. My grandfather was the only adult who really saw me. He lived about 15 minutes away in a blue house with white shutters that always smelled like pancakes and Old Spice cologne. Whenever things got tense at home, which was often, I'd grab Murphy's leash and say I was going for a walk. Then we'd disappear to Grandpa Joe's and pretend we belonged somewhere. He wasn't like my parents. He didn't interrupt or offer unsolicited advice. He just made grilled cheese sandwiches with real butter and nodded while I told him about school or books or how Cassie had screamed at me for borrowing her mascara. Sometimes I'd sit on his front porch until the streetlights came on, Murphy sprawled across my feet like a furry anchor. He's 87 now, still sharp as a tack. Still calls every Sunday at exactly 9 a.m. Still acts like I'm the one person in the world worth checking on. When Cassie left for Northwestern, the house got quieter. Not peaceful, just hollow, like a drum with no one to beat it. My parents started texting her. Constantly, calling twice a day like she was deployed overseas instead of 2 states away in Illinois. She came back a year and a half later. No warning, no explanation, just showed up one Tuesday with 2 suitcases and a story about how college was toxic. That was her entire summary of 18 months away from home. She locked her bedroom door more after that. Took long showers, had friends over at weird hours, people I didn't recognize. One of them wore sunglasses indoors in February. Another one called me little sis with this smile that made me want to deadbolt my own bedroom door. I started noticing things. The sweet, skunky smell that drifted under her door late at night. The way she'd jump when someone knocked too loud. The slurred phone calls that went on past midnight. The way her pupils looked too big or too small, never just right. But I didn't ask questions. In our house, asking questions meant you were being dramatic. The night before my arrest, I thought I was imagining it, the way she'd been hovering around me more lately, pausing outside my room, looking at me just a beat too long. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was reading too much into things. Even if I hadn't been wrong, it's not like anyone would have listened to me anyway. They put me in a holding cell that smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Cinder block walls painted that specific shade of beige that exists only in government buildings and nightmares. The bench was just wide enough to sit on but not long enough to lie down, which I'm pretty sure was intentional. No one told me anything. No timeline, no formal charges, just cold air and fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry wasps. I wasn't crying, I was too shocked for tears. It felt like my brain had been drained and refilled with static electricity. I kept picturing Murphy lying by the front window, ears perked every time a car passed, waiting for me to come home. He was like that, loyal to the point of stupidity. And I wasn't there. I thought about my parents probably saying, "We can't keep him now, not under these circumstances," like Murphy was somehow contaminated by association. I thought about Grandpa Joe. Had they called him yet? Had his voice cracked when they said my name and the word arrested in the same sentence? Maybe he believed I was innocent. Maybe he didn't. Either way, I could imagine the silence that must have followed, the kind that stretches between people who don't know how to fix what's broken. They brought me to a visitation room the next morning, fluorescent lights, metal table, chairs that had probably heard more lies than a politician's campaign headquarters. My parents were already seated when I walked in, looking like they were waiting for their table at Olive Garden. Calm, composed, maybe slightly annoyed that things were running behind schedule. "Are they treating you okay?" my mom asked, her tone polite and distant, like she was asking if the hotel had clean towels. "They gave me a bologna sandwich," I said. She smiled like that answered everything important. "We brought you some toiletries," my dad said, adjusting his baseball cap. "They'll probably get them to you later today." I didn't respond. I was too busy watching the way they wouldn't meet my eyes. It wasn't guilt I was seeing. It wasn't fear. It was damage control, like they were trying to manage a PR crisis they thought could still be contained. Finally, I said it. Quiet but clear, "You know it wasn't me." Neither of them reacted like they'd heard me. My mom took a breath like she was about to deliver a prepared statement. "Vanessa, we need to focus on what happens next. We can't change what's already done." "That's one way to avoid saying it out loud," I muttered. Dad leaned forward slightly. "No one's saying this was intentional, honey." "You mean the drugs Cassie put in my drawer?" I said. "That kind of unintentional." My mom flinched, just barely. "This isn't the time for stories, Vanessa." Stories. Like I'd walked in here pitching fiction. But then I asked the only question I actually cared about: "What are you going to do with Murphy?" They assigned me a public defender named Rachel Kim who looked like she had something to prove and a caseload that could bury a small town. She wore a navy blazer that was slightly too big and carried a worn leather briefcase instead of one of those fancy rolling cases the TV lawyers use. "I've reviewed the police report and spoken with your parents," she said, settling into the plastic chair across from me. "They're very concerned about you. They mentioned this behavior is out of character, but also that you've been withdrawn lately." I blinked at her, because I'd learned a long time ago that sometimes the best response is no response at all. "I want to go over the evidence," she continued, flipping through her file. "We need to discuss the controlled substances found in your possession." "I didn't put them there," I said. "My sister did." There was a pause. Not long, just enough to register that she'd heard something she wasn't expecting. "You're saying your sister planted the drugs?" she asked carefully. "Yes. And my parents know it. They're helping her cover it up." Rachel folded her hands on the table. "Do you have any proof of that?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Then I remembered. It came like lightning. The camera. The tiny security camera disguised as a stuffed owl on my bookshelf. Motion activated, records to a micro SD card. I'd bought it online for $49 after Murphy started having those little seizures last year. I just wanted to keep an eye on him when I wasn't home, make sure he was okay. I'd pop the SD card out every few days, check the footage on my laptop. It wasn't fancy technology, wasn't even great quality. But it worked, and it faced my dresser with a perfect view of the whole room. And if Cassie had gone in there while I was at my job at Target, it might have caught everything. My pulse jumped, but I kept my face neutral. If I told Rachel now and she told my parents, that footage might disappear before anyone official could see it. They gave me one phone call. I used it on my best friend Ashley, who picked up on the second ring. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need a huge favor. It's urgent. Are you okay? Where are you? Listen carefully. There's a stuffed owl on my bookshelf, the gray one with the big eyes. Inside it is a camera that records everything. I need you to go to my house, get Murphy, and take the owl with you. Today. Don't ask questions, don't tell anyone, just go." A pause. Then, "Okay. I'm on my way." "I'm serious, Ash. Don't leave it there. Don't trust anyone in my family." "I won't. I've got you." I hung up and exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. I didn't know what the footage would show, or if the card still worked, or if Cassie had somehow found it first. But it was something. A thread I could grab onto in this nightmare that kept getting worse. They thought I'd go down quietly. They forgot I was Grandpa Joe's granddaughter, and he taught me that sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should worry about most. 3 days later, Rachel called me back to that same concrete room. This time, she was smiling. "We've got something," she said, setting her laptop on the table. "You're going to want to see this." The footage was crystal clear. There was Cassie, walking into my room like she owned it, glancing around nervously before crossing to my dresser. She pulled a plastic baggie from her hoodie pocket, opened my bottom drawer, and slid it underneath my sweaters. She didn't touch anything else, didn't even look guilty. Just planted the evidence and left. The timestamp showed it was recorded the day before my arrest. "We're calling a meeting," Rachel said. "Pre-trial conference. Your parents and sister agreed to attend." They put us in a small conference room at the courthouse. Everything was beige and buzzing, like the walls were tired of listening to people lie to each other. Rachel and I were already seated when my family walked in. Mom came first, pressed white blouse and pursed lips, like she'd spent the drive rehearsing concerned parent expressions. Dad followed, face unreadable behind his reading glasses. Then Cassie, arms crossed, hoodie sleeves pulled down over her hands like she could shrink small enough to disappear. Rachel opened her laptop without small talk. "Before we begin, I'd like to share a piece of video evidence." She turned the screen toward them and clicked play. The room went silent except for the sound of my sister destroying my life in high definition. When it ended, Mom's face had gone white as printer paper. Dad leaned back in his chair like he'd been pushed. Cassie just sat there, watching herself get caught. "So," Rachel said calmly, "would anyone like to revise their previous statements?" The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," Cassie finally blurted out, like someone had just pulled her plug. "She wasn't supposed to actually get arrested." "Interesting," Rachel said, making notes. "And why did you do this?" Cassie's eyes darted to our parents, then back to the table. They said Grandpa Joe was leaving everything to her. Everything. The house, the money, all of it. Just because she visits him more. My mom made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. "So you decided to frame your sister for drug possession?" Rachel continued. "I thought they'd just talk to her. Maybe she'd get probation or something. I didn't know they'd arrest her." Cassie was crying now, but it wasn't the pretty crying that used to get her out of trouble. This was messy and desperate and too late. My dad finally spoke. "We were trying to protect the family." "No," I said, finding my voice. "You were trying to protect yourselves." Rachel calmly packed up her laptop. "I'll be filing motions to dismiss all charges against Vanessa, and will be providing this footage to the district attorney for review of potential charges against the rest of you." They left without saying goodbye. Just stood up and walked out like they were leaving a bad movie. That was 8 months ago. Cassie pleaded guilty to evidence tampering and filing a false police report. She got 18 months in county jail, served 9 with good behavior. She's living in Colorado Springs now, working at a call center, trying to rebuild her life. We don't talk. My parents were convicted of obstruction of justice and providing false statements to police. They each got 6 months of house arrest and 2 years probation. They're divorced now. Apparently, the truth wasn't what broke them, it was blaming each other for getting caught that finally did it. I moved in with Grandpa Joe after everything settled. He offered, and I didn't hesitate. Murphy and I fixed up the spare bedroom, repainted the kitchen, and turned the backyard into a proper garden. That house became mine in ways my childhood home never was. I'm finishing my degree in criminal justice now, full-time at the University of Colorado. Not because I want revenge, but because I want to understand the system that almost swallowed me whole. I want to help people who don't have hidden cameras or friends willing to make risky rescue missions. People ask if I'll ever forgive my family. The honest answer is I don't know. Some days I don't think about them at all. Other days I remember exactly how Cassie looked watching me get arrested, and I feel that familiar ache in my chest. What I do know is this: healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like boundaries, like new phone numbers, like not answering calls even when you could. I used to think surviving meant keeping the peace. Now I know it means keeping yourself whole. Murphy's getting older now, slower than he used to be. Sometimes he limps on cold mornings. Sometimes he sleeps so still I have to watch for his breathing. But he's here, safe, loved, still choosing me every single day. So am I. If you're watching this, if your own family has ever made you question your worth, if you've ever been the scapegoat they left behind, just know you're not alone. You don't have to disappear to be free. I'm Vanessa Martinez. I'm still here. And this time, I'm not going anywhere.